For 3 months he watched her through the post office window, never saying a word. He was a cowboy with calloused hands and a heart full of words he didn't know how to say. She was the postmaster's daughter, invisible to everyone in that small Colorado town. Then, one Tuesday morning, a letter arrived with no return address. The handwriting was rough, from a man more comfortable holding reins than a pen. It said, "I am not a man who is good with words, but I needed you to know that somebody sees you. Somebody is thinking about that smile long after he is back at the ranch." He gave her one chance. Wear something yellow to Saturday's dance, or he would disappear from her life forever. She hadn't worn that yellow dress in years. The last thing her dying mother ever made for her. One letter, one dress. One moment that would build a love lasting 35 years. The lesson. The bravest thing you'll ever do isn't fighting. It's letting someone see your heart. Sometimes happiness is just one honest moment away. If you believe in the power of taking that first step, leave a heart in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell, because stories like this remind us that courage changes everything. That letter showed up on a Tuesday morning in September of 1882, and Clara Foster knew right away it was going to change things. She just had no idea how much her entire world was about to get flipped on its head. She was standing there behind that old, worn-out wooden counter at the Empire City Post Office in the Colorado Territory, just sorting the morning mail like she always did. Her daddy, Samuel Foster, the real postmaster, had come down with a bad fever 3 weeks back that left him too weak to leave their little house out back. So Clara, at 22 years old, had stepped up and taken over. No complaints. Her hands moved through the mail with the same steady care her father always had. Empire City wasn't much, just 300 folks or so, but it was a crossroads town, which meant a whole lot of mail came passing through. The envelope that grabbed her eye didn't look like much at first. It was just addressed to the postmaster's daughter, Empire City. There was no return address. The handwriting on it was strong, but you could tell it was from a man who was more used to holding a set of reins than a pen. Clara's heart started to beat a little faster as she held it. In all her time helping her dad, nobody had ever sent a letter to her like this. She looked around to make sure the coast was clear. Then she gently tore it open. The paper inside was coarse, the kind a cowboy might keep in his saddlebag. The note was short. It said, "Miss Foster, I have been watching you from the post office window for about 3 months. Every Tuesday and Friday when I ride into town for supplies, I see you sorting those letters. You handle each one so carefully, like the story inside really matters. You even smile sometimes when you see who it is from, probably thinking about the folks on the other end. I'm not a man who is good with words, but I needed you to know that somebody sees you. Somebody is thinking about that smile long after he is back at the ranch. If you would allow me to introduce myself the right way, I will be at the dance on Saturday night. I will be wearing a blue shirt with a black vest. If you wear something yellow, I will know you are open to meeting. If you do not, I will surely understand and won't bother you again. Respectfully, Nathan Ellis." Clara read that letter 3 times over, and her face got hotter each time. She knew who Nathan Ellis was, at least by his reputation. He was a handover at the Double Bar Ranch, about 5 miles out of town, one of the better outfits around. She had certainly seen him before. You would have to be blind as a bat not to notice a man like Nathan Ellis. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes the color of good whiskey. But it was more than just his looks. It was the way he stood with a quiet confidence that didn't need to be loud or boastful. And the thought that he had noticed her, really and truly noticed her, started a little flutter in her chest she thought was long gone. In a small town like Empire City, most of the fellas her age had already decided who she was. She was the postmaster's daughter, respectable and out of reach, more of an idea than a real woman. The few that had shown any interest were lukewarm at best, more interested in her father's steady job than in Clara herself. She slipped the letter deep into her apron pocket and tried to get back to sorting mail, but her thoughts were a million miles away. Saturday was only 4 days off. She did have a yellow dress, one her mother made for her right before the influenza took her 6 years ago. It was a simple dress, but beautifully made, with tiny pearl buttons running down the front and some lace on the collar and cuffs. She had not put it on in over a year, always saving it for some special day that never seemed to come in a place like Empire City. The little bell over the door jingled, and in walked Martha Green with a stack of packages for her daughter back in Kansas City. Clara pushed all her thoughts of Nathan Ellis away and got to work, weighing the boxes and figuring the postage like she had done 1,000 times. But all day long, her hand kept finding its way to her pocket, feeling the folded letter that felt just like a secret promise. That night, after she had locked up the post office and made some supper for her father, she sat by his bed while he ate a little bit of thin soup. Samuel Foster had gotten skinny from being sick. His face was drawn and his hands shook a little bit as he held the spoon. But his eyes were still just as sharp as ever, and he looked at his daughter with the same keen eye he used for a suspicious-looking package. "You seem a world away tonight," he said, putting his bowl down. "Something happened at the office?" Clara thought about making something up, but she knew better. Her father could always see right through her. "I got a letter," she said. "A personal one." Samuel's eyebrows went up. "From who?" "From Nathan Ellis. He works over at the Double Bar Ranch." Her father got real quiet for a second, just thinking. "That young fella who always makes a point to tip his hat when he gets the mail for the ranch. I have seen him. He seems like a steady man from what little I know. What did he have to say?" Clara pulled the letter from her apron and gave it to her father, watching his face while he read it. When he was done, he folded it up nice and neat and handed it back. "Well?" she finally asked when he didn't say anything. "Well, what?" he replied. "You are 22 years old, Clara. You are more than old enough to decide for yourself if you want to wear a yellow dress to a dance." He stopped for a second, then said, "Your mother would have loved the romance of it all. A secret letter to the postmaster's daughter. You think I ought to go? I think you have been taking care of me and this post office for far too long. You deserve to find some happiness for yourself." He reached over and took her hand. His grip was weak, but it was warm. "I'm getting stronger. Doc Stevens said another week and I will be back at it. You do not need to put your whole life on hold for me." Clara could feel tears starting to well up in her eyes. "I am not putting anything on hold." "Yes, you are, and we both know it is true. How many parties has Nancy Wilson invited you to that you turned down to look after me? How many young men have you pushed away because you figured you didn't have the time?" He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Wear the yellow dress, Clara. Just see what happens." The next 4 days crawled by slower than molasses in winter. Clara buried herself in work, organizing that post office so thoroughly that every single slot was perfect and every stray paper was filed away. She went next door and helped Mrs. Chen take inventory at the general store. She even volunteered to help Nancy Wilson get the food ready for the Saturday dance. She did anything she could think of to keep her mind off of Nathan Ellis and that letter. But when night came, as she lay in her small bed, her mind would just take off and run. What in the world would they talk about? What if they had nothing to say to each other? What if he was disappointed when he met her up close? When she was not just a person he saw through a window, but a real woman with work-roughened hands and a habit of speaking her mind. Saturday finally came, and it was a bright, beautiful day. It was one of those perfect September days where summer was still hanging on, but you could feel autumn waiting right around the bend. Clara was up before the sun, too nervous to sleep. She made her father breakfast and was so relieved to see him eating with a real appetite for the first time in weeks. Doc Stevens had been right. Samuel Foster was getting his strength back a little more each day. The dance was being held at the town hall, which was a big wooden building that wore a lot of different hats. On Sundays it was a church. On weekdays it was sometimes used as a school. But on Saturday nights it became the heart and soul of Empire City. Clara spent her afternoon helping Nancy and some of the other women get the place decorated. stringing up paper lanterns and setting out tables for the food and drinks. The musicians showed up around 4 in the afternoon. It was 3 fellas with a fiddle, a guitar, and a harmonica, ready to play clear through till midnight. Nancy, a small woman with reddish-brown hair and a smile that said she knew everything, pulled Clara aside while they were setting out cookies. "You are wearing your yellow dress tonight, aren't you?" Clara almost dropped the whole plate. "How did you know about that?" "I didn't," Nancy said with a big grin. "But the look on your face just told me everything I need to know. Who is he?" "I do not rightly know yet. Not for real. But you want to find out?" Clara thought for a second, then she nodded. "Yes, I want to find out." "Good," Nancy said, squeezing her arm. "It is about time. Now you go on home. Go get yourself ready. Make yourself feel as beautiful as you truly are." Clara walked back to the little house behind the post office as the sun started to dip down behind the mountains. She heated up some water for a bath and scrubbed away the dust of the week with some lavender soap she had been hoarding. She washed her hair, then sat by the open window and brushed it dry until it shined like spun honey in the evening light. The yellow dress fit like it was made for her, as if her mother had somehow known this very moment was coming. Clara looked at herself in the little mirror over her dresser and barely knew the woman staring back. She had left her hair down, which was not like her at all, and its waves fell right past her shoulders. She put a little rose oil on her wrists and on her throat. No jewelry, save for a simple gold locket that had belonged to her mother. Her daddy was nodding off in his armchair when she went to tell him goodbye, but his eyes fluttered open as she came in. He just stared at her for a long second, and she saw his eyes get a little misty. "You're the spittin' image of your mother at your age," he said, his voice soft. "She'd be so proud of you, my Clara girl." Clara leaned down and kissed his forehead. "I won't be out too late. Stay as long as you please. I'll be just fine. I've got my book, a good lamp, and all the time in the world." The walk to the town hall was a short one, less than 5 minutes, but every single step felt heavy with meaning. Clara could already hear the band striking up a tune, the cheerful sound of a fiddle dancing on the evening breeze. Folks were showing up from every which way, families and sweethearts and bunches of young people, all laughing and hollering to one another. The Saturday night dance was about the only real fun to be had in Empire City, so people rode in from miles around to be there. Clara stopped for a moment at the base of the steps that led up to the hall, giving her dress one last nervous smoothing. Her heart was beating a rhythm so hard she figured you could see it right through the cotton. What if Nathan Ellis had second thoughts? What if he did not even show up? Or worse, what if he showed up with another girl on his arm? She made herself take a deep breath, climb those steps, and walk through the door. The whole place looked different. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow on the wooden floor that was already thick with dancers. Along the walls, tables were groaning under the weight of food and drink. Little kids darted between the grown-ups, their squeals and laughter just adding to the happy noise. Clara stood there in the doorway, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for a man in a blue shirt and a black vest. Miss Foster. She turned around and found herself looking right up into the sun-weathered face of Nathan Ellis. He was a good bit taller than she'd pictured, with broad shoulders filling out that blue shirt and black vest he promised. His dark hair was combed neat, still a little damp, and he smelled clean like soap and leather, with something else she couldn't quite put her finger on. Maybe pine needles. He was holding his hat in his hands, his fingers fiddling with the brim like he was nervous. "Mr. Ellis," she said, and was mighty thankful her voice came out as steady as a rock. "You wore yellow." A grin spread across his face, and it chased all the worry right out of his eyes. "I was hoping you would, but I couldn't be sure." "I almost didn't," she confessed. "I was a bundle of nerves." "Me too. Still am." He took a look around at the bustling hall. "Would you mind stepping outside for a bit? It's a bit of a ruckus in here, and I'd sure like to hear you when you talk." Clara nodded, and he offered her his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength of his muscle beneath the shirt sleeve, and let him lead her back out onto the big porch that ran all the way around the town hall. A few other couples had the same idea, looking for a quiet corner to talk, but Nathan led her down to the far end where they could be mostly by themselves. For a minute, they just stood there quietly, looking out over Empire City as twilight began to blanket the town. Lamps were starting to flicker on in windows, making little golden puddles of light up and down the main street. To the west, the mountains stood like dark giants against a deep purple sky. "Thank you for the letter," Clara finally said. "I wasn't expecting it. I must have written that thing 20 times before I got it to where it sounded halfway right. And even then, I'm not sure I said what I was trying to say." He turned to look at her, his face full of sincerity. "I've been wanting to speak to you for months, but I just couldn't work up the nerve. Every time I'd ride into town, I'd tell myself that today was the day I was finally going to introduce myself proper, but every time I'd just grab the ranch's mail and ride off like a yellow-bellied coward." "You don't strike me as a coward. Maybe not about most things, but about you? You had me scared to death." He said it so plainly, with such raw honesty, that Clara felt a knot in her chest just come undone. "You still do, a little? I scare you? Why on earth?" Nathan raked a hand through his hair, messing up the careful part. "Because the very first time I laid eyes on you, something deep inside me knew you were important. And I've never been any good with important things. I can break a wild horse, work a herd of cattle, mend a fence, and shoot straight as an arrow. But talking to a woman I can't get out of my head, well, that's harder than anything I've ever done." Clara could feel a blush creeping up her neck. "You think about me all the time? It's getting to be a problem. I let 3 calves go unbranded last week because I was too busy thinking about the way you push your hair behind your ear when you're focused on something." She let out a little laugh, surprised and genuinely pleased. "That's a very specific thing to notice. I notice things about you, I can't seem to help it." He took a small step closer, not too close, but just enough that she had to tip her chin up to keep looking him in the eye. "I'd like to know more. Everything, if you'll let me. What you think about when you're sorting all those letters, what you dream of at night, what makes you laugh, what you're scared of, all of it." Clara had never had a man speak to her with such straightforward intensity. Most fellas she knew hid behind polite chit-chat and by-the-book courtin'. Nathan Ellis was just laying it all out on the table, offering his honest self with no shield. And it made her want to do the exact same thing. "I think about the folks who wrote the letters," she said. "I try to picture their lives, their stories. There's a woman in Missouri who writes to her sister here, and she always presses flowers inside. I wonder what her garden looks like. A fella in Denver sends his mother money every single month, regular as clockwork, and I hope he understands how much that must mean to her. The letters, they aren't just paper and ink to me. They're lifelines, little threads connecting people who are miles and miles apart." Nathan just listened, his eyes fixed on her face, taking in every word. "What do you dream about?" "I used to dream about getting out of Empire City, about seeing what was on the other side of these mountains. But after my mother passed and my daddy needed me, those dreams started to feel selfish. So now, I dream about smaller things. A shelf full of books, a little garden of my own, having someone to talk to who actually listens." She paused. "What about you? What do you dream about?" "I dream about having my own spread someday. Nothing huge, just enough land for a decent herd and a house I built with my own 2 hands. I dream about coming home at night to something more than a bunkhouse full of snoring cowhands. I dream about meaning something to someone." He gave a small smile. "I dream about a woman who cares about pressed flowers and letters from Missouri." The music got louder from inside the hall, and a few couples started wandering out onto the porch to catch their breath between songs. Nathan glanced at the door, then back at Clara. Would you care to dance? Or we could just keep talking or go for a walk. Whatever you'd like. Let's walk, Clara said, surprising herself. I want to keep talking. They went down the steps and started strolling along Main Street, staying in the warm circles of light from the lamps. Empire City was peaceful and quiet, except for the sound of the fiddle drifting from the town hall and a dog barking somewhere down the way. Most everyone in town was either at the dance or already tucked in for the night. Nathan kept a polite space between them, but now and then his arm would brush against hers as they walked. They were just little touches, but they made Clara feel his presence right down to her toes. Tell me about your family, she said. Where'd you come from? Texas, originally. My pa had a small ranch down near San Antonio, but we lost it all when I was about 15. Drought, debt, a string of bad luck. He passed on the next year. My mama died when I was just a baby, so I don't have any memory of her. After my pa was gone, I just drifted, working on different ranches and moving north a little at a time. I've been at the Double Bar for 2 years now. It's the longest I've ever stayed in one place since I left Texas. You like it there? The foreman's a fair man, the work is steady, and the pay is decent enough. But it's somebody else's dream, you know, not mine. I sock away every dollar I can, hoping that one of these days I'll have enough to buy a piece of land of my own. He looked over at her. What keeps you in Empire City besides your father, I mean? Clara thought about that for a good long moment. I used to think it was just my duty, looking after him in the post office. But here lately, I've come to realize that I truly like it here. I know everybody, and everybody knows me. There's a real comfort in that. And the mountains, she said, nodding toward the dark peaks. I never get tired of looking at them. Every single morning they look different, depending on the light and the time of year. They make me feel small, but in a good way. Like my own troubles aren't quite as big as they feel. I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes when I'm out riding the fence lines, I'll just pull up and look around, and it feels like the land itself is bigger than any worry a man could ever have. They walked on in a comfortable silence for a spell, the sound of their boots echoing on the wooden boardwalk. When they got to the end of Main Street, where the town faded into a dirt road, they just naturally turned and started walking back, no words needed. Can I ask you something? Nathan said as they headed back toward the lights. In your letter, you said if I didn't wear yellow, you'd understand and wouldn't trouble me anymore. Would you really have just let it go? He considered it. I would have been heartbroken, I'll tell you that, but yes, I wouldn't have wanted to make you feel cornered. You deserve to make your own choice. What if I had worn yellow, but we found we had nothing to say to each other? What if we discovered we were all wrong for one another? Well, then at least we would have known for sure. At least I wouldn't have had to spend the rest of my days wondering what if. He stopped walking then, and turned so he was facing her. But I don't think we're wrong for each other, Clara. Do you? Clara looked him square in the eye, and she saw both hope and a little bit of fear there. No, Nathan, she said softly. I don't think we're wrong for each other at all. The smile that lit up Nathan's face was like watching the sun come up over the mountains, spreading light and a welcome warmth on everything. That was good. That was a fine thing indeed. Back at the town hall, they shared 3 whole dances. Nathan held her with respect, yet his grip was firm as he led her through the steps, moving with a smoothness you would not expect from a cowboy. Clara felt like she was drifting on air, hardly noticing the other folks or the curious looks they were getting. In a place as small as Empire City, her stepping out with Nathan Ellis was bound to set tongues wagging, but she realized she did not mind one bit. As the night wore on and the hall started to empty, Nathan saw her home. They lingered at the gate of her little house, both of them unwilling for the evening to be over. Could I see you again? Nathan finally asked. Maybe tomorrow? I could stop by after the church service? I would like that very much, but I ought to tell you something. I am not one for taking things slow. When I see something I want, I go right for it. He said this, with a straight face, studying her for a sign. In the dark, with the night as her shield, Clara felt brave. And what is it you want? You? I want to learn everything there is to know about you. I want to be the reason you smile each day. I want to be the man you picture when you hold those letters and dream about the stories inside them. He paused for a breath. I know this is all happening mighty fast. I know we only just met. But I also know some things are worth being sure about right away. I feel it too, Clara whispered back. It is both frightening and wonderful. The best things in life usually are. He reached for her hand, his work-roughened fingers closing gently over hers. Good night, Clara Foster. I am glad you wore yellow. Good night, Nathan Ellis. And I am glad you wrote that letter. She stayed there and watched him walk down Main Street until he was just a shadow that finally vanished into the night. Only after he was gone did she step inside, where her father was still up, reading by the lamplight. You are home late, Samuel remarked, putting his book aside with a smile that said he knew more than he was letting on. Yes, Clara said, a smile spreading across her own face that she could not hold back. Yes, I surely am. The next morning, Clara woke up feeling a buzz of excitement that made sitting through the church service a real challenge. Reverend Morrison gave a sermon on patience and faith that felt like it went on for an eternity. She saw Nathan sitting about 3 rows behind her, his hair still a little damp and combed neat, looking a bit fenced in, wearing his Sunday best. He met her gaze and a smile touched his lips, making her heart do a little flip. When the service let out, people milled about outside to visit. Nathan made a straight line right for her. Samuel Foster eyed the young man's approach, sizing him up. Mr. Foster, Nathan said, taking off his hat. I was hoping I might have your permission to take Clara out for a ride this afternoon. I give you my word I will have her home well before sundown. Samuel looked him over for a good long moment. You are a hand at the Double Bar, is that correct? Yes, sir. Been there 2 years now. That is a good outfit. Dan Morrison runs a proper ranch. He glanced over at Clara, then his eyes went back to Nathan. You have my permission. But I am holding you to your word about having her back before dark. You have my word, sir. About an hour later, Clara was sitting next to Nathan on the seat of a borrowed buckboard, heading east out of Empire City. It was a perfect day, warm without being hot, and a gentle breeze was carrying the smell of pine trees and sun-baked grass. Nathan handled the reins with a practiced ease, keeping the horses at a good, steady clip. Where are you taking me? Clara asked. There is a place I want you to see. It is about an hour from here, way out on the far edge of the Double Bar's land. I head out there when I need a quiet place to think. The talk came easy as they rode along, flowing like a calm river. Nathan told her what it was like growing up in Texas, remembering his daddy teaching him how to handle a rope and a horse. Clara told him stories about her mother, about the laughter she brought into their little house, and how much she still missed that warmth, a feeling like a constant ache. She would have liked you, Clara told him. She always said the true measure of a person is not in their words, but in what they do when they think no one is looking. And what is it I do when no one is looking? You see things. You pay attention to details. You wrote me that letter, even though you were scared to. She looked right at him. Those are not small things, Nathan. The spot Nathan wanted to show her was a high meadow nestled between 2 hills. A clear creek ran right through it, and the view stretched out for miles and miles. Wild flowers were still blooming here and there in little patches, holding on against the coming fall. He helped her climb down from the wagon, and they walked over to the creek bank, where a stand of cottonwood trees gave them some shade. I stumbled on this place my first month at the Double Bar, Nathan explained. I was out chasing a stray cow and just ended up here. It felt like my own little secret. Thank you for sharing your secret with me." They sat down in the grass by the water, and Nathan pulled out a simple lunch he had packed away. There was bread, some cheese, a couple of apples, and a big jar of cold, sweet tea. They ate while they talked about all sorts of things, from the serious to the downright silly. Clara found out that Nathan could not sing a lick, but he sure loved listening to music. Nathan learned that Clara had read every single book in the town's little library twice over and was still hungry for more stories. "What do you reckon you would be doing if you were not running the post office?" he asked her. "I do not know. I have never really allowed myself to think on it." She thought about his question for a moment. "Maybe I would be a teacher. I like the thought of helping folks learn things, showing them new worlds they can find inside of books." "You would be a fine teacher. You are patient, and you have a way of explaining things that makes them easy to understand." He picked a long blade of grass and started twisting it in his fingers. "When I finally get my own ranch, it is going to need a name. I have been trying to think on one for years, but nothing ever feels quite right." "What about Cottonwood Ranch for these trees?" Nathan looked up at the big cottonwoods shading them, and then he looked at Clara. "Cottonwood Ranch. I like that. I like the sound of that a whole lot." The afternoon just flew by. They strolled along the creek while Nathan showed her the different animal tracks in the soft mud, teaching her how to tell the difference between deer, raccoon, and turkey. Clara gathered up the last of the wildflowers and wove them into a little bouquet. They talked about big things and little things, laying down the foundation of knowing one another. When the sun started dipping toward the mountains, Nathan regretfully turned the wagon back toward Empire City. On the ride home, Clara sat a little closer to him, their shoulders brushing every time the wagon hit a bump in the road. They did not say much, both of them just enjoying the quiet comfort that had grown between them. "Clara," Nathan said, just as the first buildings of the town came into sight, "I know we have only known each other for 2 days, but I need to be plain with you. I am serious about you, about where this could go. I am not just playing around or passing the time. If that is coming on too strong, too fast, you tell me right now and I will pull back." Clara reached out and put her hand in his, her fingers fitting right in with his. "It is not too much. I feel the exact same way." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, and you could see the relief wash over his face. "Good. Because I am falling in love with you, Clara Foster, and I do not believe I could stop it even if I tried." "Then do not try to stop." Samuel was rocking on the porch when they pulled up. Nathan, like a true gentleman, helped Clara down from the wagon one more time. He bid them both a good night, said he would stop by the post office tomorrow, and then he headed off into the growing twilight. "You are just glowing," Samuel said as Clara took a seat next to him. "Am I?" "Like a lantern on a dark night. It is a good thing to see." He gently patted her hand. "I like that young man. He has honest eyes and a firm handshake. Those things count for a lot." In the weeks that followed, Nathan and Clara fell into a sweet and easy rhythm. He still rode into town every Tuesday and Friday, but now he spent every spare minute he had with Clara. They went on long walks. They sat together in church. They ate supper with Samuel, who was getting his strength back every day and was almost ready to take back his full duties at the post office. Nathan was true to his word. He was earnest and steady, and completely devoted to Clara. He would order books for her all the way from Denver because he knew how much she loved to read. She would pack him a lunch on the days she knew he would be working too far from the main ranch house to come in for a meal. They even wrote letters back and forth on the days they did not see each other, little notes that did not say much of anything important, but meant the whole world. One evening, late in October, with the first hint of snow on the high peaks, Nathan showed up at the post office right as Clara was about to lock up for the night. He looked awfully nervous, twisting his hat in his hands and shifting from one foot to the other. "What is the matter?" Clara asked, her concern showing right away. "Nothing is the matter. Everything is right. So right, in fact, that I need to have a word with you and your father." Clara's heart started to beat a little faster. She turned the key in the lock and led Nathan over to their house, where Samuel was getting supper ready. Her father took one look at the expression on Nathan's face and just smiled. "I will put a pot of coffee on," Samuel said. The three of them sat around the little kitchen table, and Nathan took a deep breath. "Mr. Foster, Clara, I have been doing a whole lot of thinking and making plans. I have got enough money saved up for a down payment on a piece of land. There is a quarter section up for sale about 8 miles east of town. It has good water and plenty of grass. It is close enough to be handy, but far enough out to have our own space. I have already spoken to the bank in Denver, and they have agreed to loan me the rest for the land and for a small starter herd." He looked straight at Samuel then. "Sir, I would like your permission to marry your daughter. I know we have not been courting for very long, but I am as sure about her as I have ever been about anything. I promise you, I will work every single day for the rest of my life to make her happy and to keep her safe. I will build her the finest home I can build. She will not ever lack for a single thing I can give her." Samuel looked right at Clara. "Well, now, daughter, what is your heart telling you? Is this the man you want to spend your days with?" "Yes," Clara answered with no doubt in her voice. "Yes, I surely do. In that case, you have my permission and my blessing." Samuel leaned over the table, his hand outstretched to shake Nathan's. "Welcome to the family, son." Nathan's gaze found Clara, his eyes shining with feeling. "I do not have a ring for you just yet. I figured it was best to ask before I went and spent good money on something you might not take a shine to, but I am asking proper now. Clara Foster, will you be my wife?" "Yes, Nathan Ellis, I will be your wife." He got to his feet and drew her up into a strong embrace, holding her close. Clara could feel warm tears tracking down her face and did not mind one bit. This was just pure, simple happiness. This felt like the first day of a life she never even knew she was missing. They set the wedding for December, which gave Nathan the time he needed to settle the land deal, and gave Clara time to teach her father's new helper to manage things at the post office. Samuel was getting back on his feet, but he was not a young man anymore, and that job took its toll. A young fellow named Thomas Reed, who had just moved from Kansas with his kin, turned out to be sharp as a tack and a hard worker. Clara knew she could leave her father in his capable hands. Nancy Wilson and a few of the other town ladies pitched in to help Clara get ready for her big day. She wore her own mother's wedding gown, which they had carefully taken in to fit her just right. Nathan bought himself a brand new suit from the general store. It was made of black wool and made him look so different, handsome in a way she had not seen before. They held the service right in the town hall, which had been decorated special for the occasion with winter greenery and dozens of candles. Reverend Morrison led the ceremony in front of nearly the whole of Empire City. Clara had been born and raised there, and folks had seen her go from a little girl to a young lady. There were plenty of wet eyes and happy smiles when she and Nathan said their vows, their voices ringing out strong and sure. "I promise to love you through every season," Nathan vowed, and the old words sounded brand new coming from him, "through the hard times and the easy ones, in sickness and in health, until the day we are parted by death." "I promise to always be right by your side," Clara answered him, "to be your partner, your friend, and your home. I promise to choose you, and only you, every single day for the rest of my life." When Reverend Morrison declared them man and wife, Nathan gave her a kiss so tender it made her heart ache with happiness. The whole room broke out in clapping and cheering. It was December of 1882, the beginning of winter, and the beginning of their life as one. They had their wedding night in the little house Nathan had been putting up on his new property. It was not all the way done, just 2 rooms with a solid roof and a wood stove, but it was all theirs. He lifted her right up and carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently. He watched her face as she took it all in. "It is not much to look at yet," he said, "but I will make it a beautiful home for you. I give you my word. It is already beautiful, because we are in it together." She looked up at him, feeling a little bashful all of a sudden. "I'm so happy, Nathan. I did not even know a person could feel this happy." He gathered her in close, his hands resting softly on her waist. "Clara Ellis. I do like the sound of that. Me too." That night inside the little house that would grow right along with their new life, they started their marriage with kindness and with care. Nathan was so gentle with her, mindful that she was new to all this, and he put her comfort and her happiness first. Clara felt truly treasured for the first time in her life, like she was seen for exactly who she was. They drifted off to sleep, curled up together as the first snowflakes began to drift down outside, covering their little piece of land in a blanket of white. The winter that came was just as tough as all Colorado winters tend to be. The snow just kept piling up, and it got so cold the water in the buckets would freeze solid overnight. But inside that little house, Clara and Nathan were building a warm life. He was up and working from sunrise to sunset, looking after the small herd of cattle he had bought, mending fences, and adding on to the house bit by bit. Clara made sure the house stayed cozy and warm, and she cooked hearty meals that gave Nathan the strength for all his hard work. She also started planning a garden for the springtime. She still went to help at the post office a few days each week, not wanting to leave her father completely by himself. It kept her tied to the town and to the job she had known her whole life. Nathan never once grumbled about her going. He understood she needed that little piece of her old life while they were busy building their new one. Then in February, Clara figured out she was expecting a baby. She told Nathan one night while they were sitting near the fire, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. They were both worn out from a long day. "I am going to have a baby," she told him, plain and simple. Nathan froze for a second. Then he turned to look at her, his whole face lit up with pure wonder. "A baby? Are you certain?" "I am as certain as I can be. I reckon it will be here in the early fall." He cupped her face between his big hands and kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, and then her lips. "A baby. Our baby. Clara, I do not even have the words for how I feel right now. You do not need any words." He laid his hand on her belly, which was still flat, with the greatest care. "Hello in there. I am your daddy, and I already love you more than I knew it was possible to love anything." Clara laughed, but tears came with it. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "I sure hope so. I want to be. I want to give our child everything that I never had. A steady home, a feeling of safety, and two parents who love each other and love their child more than anything." The months of her pregnancy went by smoothly. Clara kept up with her work, even though Nathan was always fussing over her, worrying she was pushing herself too hard. Samuel was just tickled pink about being a grandfather and was already making plans for all the wooden toys he was going to carve for the baby. The ladies from Empire City gave Clara all sorts of advice. Some of it was good, but a lot of it was just old wives' tales. When spring finally rolled around and the snow all melted away, showing the brown earth again, Nathan put the finishing touches on the house expansion. They had 4 rooms now, a main bedroom, a little room for the baby, a kitchen, and a front parlor. It was not a mansion, but it was built strong and kept the cold out. Clara put in her garden with vegetables, herbs, and the same kinds of flowers her mother used to grow. As she worked the dirt, feeling the little baby kicking inside her, she thought about what a winding road her life had been on. Single letter. That one letter had been the start of everything. "What is on your mind?" Nathan asked. He had come up quiet behind her and put his hands on her shoulders. "I was just thinking how one little thing can change your whole life. If you had not sent that letter, if I had not put on that yellow dress, none of this would be real. I would have found some other way to get your attention, I promise you that. I would have kept on trying until you finally saw me. You know, I saw you long before that letter ever showed up." "You did?" "Of course I did. Did you really think I did not notice you watching me from that window? I am not that clueless. She settled back against his chest. I just never imagined that a man like you would ever look twice at a woman like me. A man like me, a dirt-poor cowboy with more big ideas than common sense, a man who is handsome and strong and good-hearted, a man who could have had his pick of any woman. Nathan gently turned her around so she was facing him. He looked serious. I picked you because you are you. The way your mind works, the way you look after people, and the way you find stories in everything you see. Those are the things that made me fall for you. It was not just your pretty face, although I do think you are beautiful. I chose you because my heart knew yours right from the start. Well, that is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me. I have been practicing. The summer arrived, hot and sunny. Nathan's little cattle herd grew, so he had to hire on 2 ranch hands to help him keep up with all the work. The Cottonwood Ranch, which was what they decided to name it, was starting to make a good name for itself. Folks in town recognized his brand and knew Nathan Ellis was a man who treated his workers fair and was honest in his dealings. Clara's belly grew big with the baby. She moved a little slower, but she never once complained. She still helped out at the post office, but not as often, since the summer heat made the trip into town a real chore. Nancy Wilson came to visit a lot, bringing food and good company, and she made Clara laugh with stories about when she was expecting her own babies, years ago. Then one day in September, when you could smell rain in the air and the cottonwood leaves were just starting to turn to gold, Clara's time came. Nathan rode as fast as he could to town to fetch the doctor and Nancy Wilson. After that, he just paced back and forth outside the bedroom like a coyote in a cage, too wound up to sit down or think about anything but the sounds he heard from inside. Samuel showed up in the afternoon. He had closed up the post office as soon as he got the news. He just sat there with Nathan, a calm presence while the younger man was tied up in knots with worry. She is a strong girl, Samuel told him, and she is stubborn. She's going to be just fine. But what if something goes wrong? What if I lose her? You just have to have faith. The labor went on all afternoon and stretched into the evening. The sun went down, brushing the sky with orange and pink, and still Nathan waited. At long last, when it was completely dark, outside the little ranch house, he heard a brand new sound. It was the sharp, angry cry of a newborn baby. Nancy opened the door, looking tired but smiling wide. You have got a son. Your wife and the baby are both doing fine. Go on in and meet him. Nathan walked into the bedroom, his legs feeling unsteady. Clara was resting against a pile of pillows. Her hair was damp with sweat, and she looked worn out, but was absolutely glowing. She held a little bundle in her arms, and she pulled the blanket back so Nathan could get a look. The baby had a red, wrinkled face, a full head of dark hair, and the tiniest, most perfect hands and feet. His eyes were squeezed tight shut, and his little mouth was moving, making soft noises. Nathan sat down on the edge of the bed as gentle as he could, scared that if he moved too fast, the whole perfect moment might just break like glass. Our son, Clara whispered. Do you want to hold him? Nathan took the baby with such care, holding the tiny little weight close against his chest. In that very moment, something deep inside Nathan just settled for good, shuffling everything he thought was important. This was his boy, his own son, a little fella who would count on him for everything. He would learn from him and carry on the life Nathan and Clara were building side by side. Hey there, Nathan whispered. I'm your papa. I've been waiting a long time to meet you. The baby boy cracked his eyes open for a second, all unfocused and dark blue, then shut them again. What are we going to name him? Clara asked. They had talked about names the whole time she was carrying him, but never landed on one. Now, looking at his son, Nathan said, Samuel, for your daddy. Samuel Ellis. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. Papa will surely love that. And when Samuel gets old enough, I will tell him all about his grandpa, who kept the Empire City Post Office going for 30 years and raised the finest daughter a man could ever hope for. They allowed Samuel Foster to come in and meet his grandson. The old man just let the tears flow as he held the little baby. "He looks just like you did when you were born, Clara. Got the same nose, the same serious look on his face. I sure hope he gets Nathan's calm nature. Mama always said I was a fussy baby. You were determined, not fussy. There is a world of difference." Little Samuel did wonderfully. He was a healthy baby, ate like a champ, and grew faster than a weed. Clara bounced back from the birth quicker than Nathan had dared to wish, getting back to her usual busy self in no time. The little house was soon filled with all the sounds and routines of a new baby, from cries in the dead of night to cooing in the daytime, and the quiet noises of nursing, rocking, and sweet lullabies. Nathan had never felt a happiness this deep. He woke up every morning with Clara next to him and his son sleeping in the cradle nearby. He worked his tail off all day building their ranch and their future. And he came home every evening to a house full of warmth, laughter, and a real sense of purpose. This was the life he had dreamed about during all those long years of rambling from one ranch to another. This feeling of having a place, of building something that would last long after he was gone. The years that came next were good ones, though they had their share of troubles. Cottonwood Ranch grew at a steady pace. Nathan discovered he had a real knack for ranching, a gut feeling about cattle and the land that always steered him right. Clara handled their money with the same sharp eye she used for sorting mail, making sure they spent smart and saved regular. When Samuel was 2, Clara got pregnant again. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1886. She was a tiny, delicate baby they named Rose after Clara's mother. Rose was a quieter baby than Samuel had been, more happy to just watch the world go by than to make demands. And she had Clara's honey-colored hair and smart eyes. Samuel Foster got to see both his grandkids grow into toddlers, and he spent his last years splitting his time between the post office and the ranch. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1887. And while they surely missed him, they found comfort knowing he had seen Clara happy and settled. He had known his grandkids and lived to see the love he and his wife started carry on to a new generation. Clara officially took over as postmaster after her father's passing, working part-time with help from Thomas Reed. She would bring young Samuel and Rose with her some days, letting them play in the post office while she got her work done. Samuel, who was 4 years old by then, just loved sorting letters into the little wooden slots, all careful and serious, just like his mother. Rose liked looking at the pictures on the advertisements and packages, studying them with a powerful focus. Nathan kept on growing Cottonwood Ranch, and before long he owned a full section of land and was running several hundred head of cattle. He hired on more hands and built a proper bunkhouse for them. The little 2-room house they started with had been added onto again and again until it was a comfortable home with 6 rooms, a wide porch, and a root cellar for storing food. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Clara stood out on that porch, watching the setting sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Samuel and Rose were fast asleep inside, tuckered out from a long day of playing. The evening air was warm and smelled of all the things blooming on the breeze. "Do you ever think about that first letter?" Clara asked, leaning her head on Nathan's side. "Sometimes. I still have it. You know, I kept that letter." "You did? But why?" "Because it was the bravest thing I've ever done. I wanted a reminder of that courage." He took a breath. "Do you still have my letter?" "Of course I do. It is in my mother's jewelry box with all the other letters you wrote me. I never knew you saved them. Every last one of them." She turned to look him in the eye. "They tell the story of us, Nathan. From that very first letter to the ones you sent when you had to go to Denver on business, to the silly little notes you leave for me when you head out early to check on the herd. They are our history. Should we give them to the children one day, so they know how their mama and papa fell in love? I think that is a beautiful idea." Clara stood on her tiptoes and gave him a kiss. "Thank you for being brave enough to write that first letter." He smiled. "Thank you for being brave enough to wear yellow." They stood there together as the dark settled, over Cottonwood Ranch, over Empire City, and over the mountains and plains of the Colorado Territory. 5 years had gone by since a single letter had changed both of their lives. The love that had sparked from that one simple, brave act had grown and gotten deeper, becoming the rock-solid foundation of everything good in their world. Samuel grew up to be a thoughtful, serious boy who loved learning and books, just like his mother. Rose was more of a wild spirit, always trailing her father around the ranch, wanting to help with every little thing. In 1889, Clara gave birth to their third child, another boy they named James. He was a happy, easygoing baby, peaceful and content, where his older brother and sister had been a handful. The ranch did well. Nathan's gut instincts and hard work, paired with Clara's careful planning, made Cottonwood Ranch one of the most successful outfits in the whole area. They were not what you would call rich, not by a long shot, but they were comfortable and felt secure. They could provide for their family and even lend a hand to others when times got tough. Clara kept up her work at the post office, finding that she really enjoyed having a life at home and a public role in town. She had hired a young woman named Alice to help out with the children, which gave her the time to manage both her job and her own passions. She started a small library in Empire City, giving away many of her own books and getting others to do the same. It was just in a corner of the town hall, but it did its job, getting books into the hands of folks who otherwise would not have any. Nathan served on the town council, helping to make decisions about the future of Empire City. As the town slowly grew, there were whispers that the railroad might be coming through in a few years, which was bound to change everything. That growth would speed up, bringing both good chances and new problems. Nathan wanted to make sure that growth was handled with care, keeping what made Empire City a good place to live, while still welcoming the progress that had to come. One evening in the summer of 1891, almost 9 years after that first letter, Nathan and Clara stole a quiet evening just for themselves. Alice was watching the children, so they rode out to the high meadow where Nathan had taken Clara on their second day together. The cottonwood trees were much fuller now, and the stream ran clear and cold. They laid out a blanket and stretched out on their backs, just looking up at the sky as the stars started to pop out. "Do you ever wish your life had gone a different way?" Nathan asked. "You could have left Empire City, seen other places, maybe married a fellow with more schooling, someone who could buy you fancy things." Clara rolled onto her side to look at him. "Never. Not for one single second. This life with you, with our children on this land we are building together. This is exactly what I want. Even when it is hard sometimes, even with you working long hours and us having more worries than comforts. It is special because of those things. We built this, Nathan. Nobody just handed it to us. Every piece of comfort we have, we earned it together. That means something." She gently traced the line of his jaw with her finger. "And you give me something worth more than any fancy things. You give me a real partnership. You see me as your equal. You listen when I have something to say. You respect my mind and my work. Do you have any idea how rare that is? It ought not to be rare. It ought to be normal, but it is not, and that makes it precious." She kissed him softly. "I love you, Nathan Ellis, more today than the day we got married, and I will love you even more tomorrow. That is the gift you have given me, a love that keeps on growing instead of fading. I love you too, Clara. You are the very heart of me. You and those 3 kids sleeping back at the house. Everything I do is for y'all, for the life we are making." They stayed out there until it was pitch dark, talking and dreaming about what was to come. Samuel would be old enough for school soon, and they went back and forth on whether to send him to the little one-room schoolhouse in Empire City, or to see if they could hire a tutor to come out to the ranch. Rose was showing a real interest in horses, which Nathan encouraged, believing a woman ought to know how to handle herself in this country. James was still too little to really show his personality, but he had a smile that could light up a whole room. As 1891 turned into 1892, Cottonwood Ranch celebrated its 10th year. Nathan threw a big party, inviting all the neighbors and their friends from town. The tables were groaning under the weight of all the food. Children ran all over the place playing games while the grown-ups talked and laughed. Laughter filled the air. The celebration was about more than just the ranch. It was for their community, for all the bonds they had built up. Clara stood on the porch of their now larger home, watching everything, feeling a contentment that settled deep in her bones. Nancy Wilson came and stood with her. Both women looked on as their children played. "You look happy," Nancy remarked. "I am absolutely and completely happy. You deserve every bit of it. You and Nathan. Y'all built something good right here. We have been mighty lucky. Luck did not have a thing to do with it. You worked hard. You were smart. You chose each other and kept on choosing each other." Nancy squeezed Clara's arm. "That is not luck. That is pure commitment." Nathan appeared on Clara's other side, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you two discussing so seriously?" "Life," Clara said, "and love. The usual deep subjects for a party. Someone has to keep things from getting too silly." She rested her head against him. "Thank you for this, for every bit of this. You are welcome, but I reckon I am the one who ought to be thanking you." They stood together watching their guests, their children running around full of pure joy, with their lands spreading out before them. A decade had gone by since a cowboy wrote a letter to the postmaster's daughter. The life that sprouted from that one brave act was bigger than either of them ever dreamed. The years just kept on rolling, and each one brought new growth and changes. Samuel turned out to be exceptionally bright, and when he turned 10, Nathan and Clara had to make the hard choice to send him to a boarding school over in Denver. It was not because they wanted him gone, but because they wanted him to have chances they just could not give him on the ranch. Samuel himself was thrilled about the prospect, just hungry for learning and new sights. Rose blossomed into a capable young lady who could sit a horse as good as any ranch hand, and had a natural way with animals. She would help her daddy train the horses, showing a kind of patience and instinct that made Nathan swell with pride. She cared nothing for the usual girly things, choosing leather and denim over dresses every time. Clara backed her daughter completely, recalling how she herself sometimes felt pinched by what society expected. James was the quiet heart of the family, fascinated by plants and all things that grew. He would spend hours in the garden with his mama, learning the names of herbs and flowers and what it took for each one to flourish. He often spoke of being a doctor one day, saying he wanted to help folks get well. In 1895, Clara welcomed their fourth and last child, a little girl they named Grace. She was a complete surprise, arriving when Clara was 35 and figured those days were long past. But Grace was a pure delight from the second she was born, a cheerful baby who grew into a sweet little toddler that had everybody wrapped around her finger. Nathan hit 40 that same year. He was still strong and able, but he was starting to feel the years of hard work in his bones. His back would ache on chilly mornings, and his hands would get stiff now and then, but he was content with the life he had made. The Cottonwood Ranch was doing well and turning a good profit. His children were healthy and full of life. And his wife, well, she could still make his heart skip a beat with just a smile. One afternoon in the late fall, Clara was at the post office when a young woman with a baby came in. She looked scared and worn out from the road, her clothes covered in dust from the road. Clara knew that look right away. This was somebody running from trouble. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Clara asked softly. The woman paused for a moment, then said, "I'm looking for work. Any kind of work at all. I can clean, cook, sew, anything. What is your name?" "Sarah Mitchell. This here is my daughter, Emma." She pulled the baby in tighter. Her father, he was not a kind man. "I had to leave, but now I do not have anywhere to go, and not a penny to my name. I just need a chance." Clara looked the young woman over, and under all that fear she saw a strong will. She made up her mind in a hurry. "Can you start working today? I need help at the house. I have 4 children, and the littlest one is still a baby. The work is tough, but I pay fair, and you would have a place to stay and food to eat." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Truly? You would take me on just like that without references? I trust my gut about folks. Come on now, let me lock up this place and I will take you home so you can meet my husband." At first, Nathan was not so sure when Clara showed up with Sarah and little Emma, but he always trusted his wife's good sense. They set Sarah up in a little room just off the kitchen, and she got right to work. She turned out to be just what Clara thought: a hard worker, honest as the day is long, and thankful for the chance she had been given. Emma was a sweet little thing who soon became a good friend for Grace. As the 19th century was winding down, Empire City kept on getting bigger. The railroad did come through like they said, and it brought a boom with it. New stores opened up, more families moved in. The little town Clara knew as a girl, where everybody knew everybody, was changing into something new. It was richer for sure, but it did not feel as close-knit. Clara and Nathan saw all this happening and had mixed thoughts. Progress had to happen, and it brought good things. But you lost something in the bargain too, some feeling of community that was there when everyone knew their neighbors. They did their best to hold on to what they could. They would have folks over to the ranch, keep up with old friends, and teach their kids how important it was to know the people next door. In 1899, right as the new century was about to begin, Nathan and Clara celebrated being married for 17 years. Samuel was off at school, but Rose, James, and Grace were there, along with Sarah and Emma, who felt just like family now. They all sat around the dinner table, eating and telling stories and laughing. After they finished eating, Nathan took Clara by the arm. "Come on with me. I have got something I want to show you." He took her out to the barn. He had a gift hidden there. It was a handsome wooden chest, carved all over with delicate cottonwood leaves and flowers. "I made this for you, to keep your letters in." Clara traced her fingers across the smooth wood, amazed by the fine work. "Nathan, it is just beautiful. When on earth did you find the time to do this?" "I've been working on it for months now, just a little here and there in the evenings." "Go on, open it up." The inside of the chest was lined with a soft cloth and had little sections built in. But the most important thing was what was already inside. It was every single letter Nathan had ever sent to Clara, saved with care and put in order by date. "I found where you were keeping them," Nathan confessed. "I figured they deserved a real home, a place they would be safe for good. Maybe one day, long after we are gone, somebody will find them and know that our love was true." Clara was so choked up with tears she could not say a word. She just wrapped her arms around Nathan and held on with all her might. After all this time, he could still find ways to surprise her, to show her just how deep his love and care went. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "Thank you for every single letter, every word, every single moment of these 17 years. Thank you for saying yes, for wearing that yellow dress, and for picking me." They stood there in the barn, holding one another just like they had hundreds of times. Being together was as natural as taking a breath. The old century was coming to an end, but their story of love went on, just as strong as it was on the first day. The new century came with its own mix of good times and hard trials. Samuel finished his schooling in Denver and set his sights on being a lawyer, heading to a university way back east. Rose, at 18 years old, married the son of a rancher nearby, a good young man that both Nathan and Clara liked a lot. They had the wedding right there at Cottonwood Ranch, a happy celebration that brought folks in from all around. James, who was now 15, was more set than ever on becoming a doctor, and he read every medical book he could find. Grace, at 6, was the sunshine of the household, and her laughter filled up the quiet places Rose's departure had left behind. Sarah and Emma stayed on living with them, and Sarah was so much more than just help. She was family now. Nathan's hair had gone mostly gray, and Clara's honey-colored hair was streaked with silver. But when they would look at one another, they could still see that young fellow and that young woman who first met at a dance, the two who fell in love through letters and talks and dreaming together. In 1905, Clara was officially offered the job of postmaster, getting the real title instead of just doing the work. She took it with pride, being one of the only women postmasters in all of Colorado. She ran that post office just right, with all the same care her own father had, and the townspeople respected her good sense and her fairness. Nathan was on the town council for a few terms, and was a big part of getting a real schoolhouse built in Empire City, with several teachers and all the right supplies. He often thought about how little schooling he had had, and he wanted to make sure the next bunch of kids had a better chance. Their life was not all sunshine, though. They had their share of heartaches. They lost good friends to sickness and bad luck, the sad price you pay as the years go by. They worried over their children, the way all parents do, just hoping they had raised them right to face whatever the world threw at them. They weathered dry spells that pushed the ranch to its limits, and bitter winters that claimed some of their animals. But they went through it all side by side. Theirs was a partnership made from love and made stronger by the years. In 1910, Nathan and Clara marked 28 years of marriage. Their children were all grown up, or close to it. Samuel was a lawyer working in Denver, married to a woman from Philadelphia that they took a real shine to. Rose had blessed them with 2 grandchildren and was pregnant with their 3rd child. Their boy, James, was off at medical school, driven and sharp as a tack. And Grace, only 15, was already talking about shaping young minds as a teacher. That night, lying there in the bed inside the home they'd raised from the ground up, Nathan gathered Clara into his arms. 28 years. It felt like a lifetime, and the blink of an eye, all at once, in the best possible way. Each day had been full to the brim. Do you still remember that first letter? Every last word. I could say it back to you right now if you wanted. I was so shaky writing that thing. I figured you'd just laugh at me. I darn near cried when I read it. Nobody had ever looked at me that way before. Really and truly looked at me. Nathan placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. I still see you. Every single day I see you. You are the most wonderful person I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. We've had ourselves a good life, haven't we? The very best life. Better than anything I ever dared to dream. They drifted off to sleep holding hands, just as they had nearly every night for 28 years, and the years kept rolling on, steady as a river. Nathan's health started to fade just a little at a time, his body finally asking for rest after decades of sun-up to sundown labor. He got a nagging cough that the town doctor just could not seem to shake, and his get-up-and-go started to get up and go. But his spirit, that was as strong as ever, and he kept the ranch running with good help from his managers and Rose's husband, who was taking on more of the work every day. Clara, she stayed lively and busy, still managing the post office at 50 years old. Her mind was as sharp as a new knife, and her kindness had only grown deeper over the years. Folks all around Empire City knew her as the woman who'd help anybody with anything, who always had good sense to share and the time to listen. In the spring of 1915, while the world across the ocean was turning dark with war, the Cottonwood Ranch marked its 33rd year. Nathan was 65 then, his hair gone white as snow and his face a map of his life. But he was still the handsomest man Clara had ever seen. They stood out on the porch together, a place they had been 1,000 times before, just watching the sun dip below the horizon. I've been thinking about that letter an awful lot these last few days. Nathan said softly, the one that got this whole thing started. Why is that? Because I need you to know, if I had to live my whole life all over again, I would write you that very same letter. I would make that very same choice. You, Clara Ellis, are the best decision I ever made in my life. And you are my own. She reached for his hand, feeling the familiar rough skin, the strength that was still there even as his body grew weaker. Whatever is coming for us, however much time we have left, I need you to know I have never once regretted a single second of it. Not even the tough times, maybe especially the tough times. They showed me what we were really made of, what the two of us could get through side by side. Nathan passed away in his sleep 2 years later in the early autumn of 1917. Clara woke up and found him lying peacefully next to her, his hand still holding hers, his face looking more relaxed than it had in months. He was 67 years old. They had been married for 35 years. The grief was a heavy thing, a weight so real it felt hard to draw a breath. But even in all that sorrow, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had been given so much time, so much love. A lot of folks go through their whole lives and never find the kind of thing they had shared. The funeral was held right there at the Cottonwood Ranch, and people came from all over the county to pay their respects. Nathan had left his mark on many lives and was a man who was respected and truly loved by everyone who knew him. Samuel came all the way from Denver with his family. Rose brought her children. James had to step away from his doctor's office for a few days. Grace, now 22 and teaching in a town nearby, came right home to be with her mother. They laid Nathan to rest on a hill that looked out over the ranch, right under the shade of the cottonwood trees he loved so much. Clara stood there by the fresh earth long after everyone else was gone, just talking to him like she had every day of their married life. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for that letter. Thank you for loving me so good. I am going to miss you every moment of every day, but I won't fall apart. We built too much beauty for me to do that. I will keep on living, and I will keep on remembering, and I will make sure every soul knows what a good man you were." Clara lived for another 15 years after Nathan was gone, staying busy and part of things right up to the end. She finally hung up her hat at the post office when she was 65, passing the job on to a younger person. She filled her days with her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandpa, about the first days of the Cottonwood Ranch, and about a letter that started a whole new world. She kept that little wooden chest Nathan had made for her right by her bed, and every now and then she would pull out the letters and read them, almost hearing his voice in those carefully written words. That first letter, all yellow and soft with age, was still her favorite. She could still call up the feeling of reading it for the very first time. The way her heart had started to pound. The little seed of hope that had started to grow inside her chest. Clara passed on in her sleep in 1932, at the age of 72. Her children found her with a peaceful smile on her face, with one hand resting on the wooden chest, and that first letter lying open right beside her. They buried her right next to Nathan under the cottonwood trees with a stone that said, "Clara Foster Ellis, beloved wife, mother, and postmaster." She saw stories in everything. The ranch kept going under Rose's careful hand, and in time was passed down to her own children. The wooden chest and all the letters were kept safe, becoming a true family treasure. New generations would read them and wonder at the love story they told, at the bravery it took to write that first letter, and at the wisdom it took to wear a simple yellow dress. Empire City grew up and changed, turning from a small town into a small city, but some things stayed the same. The post office was still there, though it was a lot bigger now. The town hall, where Clara and Nathan had their first dance and later said their vows, was now a protected historical building. And the Cottonwood Ranch, though it had new barns and fences, still had the name Nathan had picked out with Clara's help, a reminder of one perfect afternoon down by a creek when the world was new and anything felt possible. That letter that started it all, kept safe in its wooden box, was passed down through the family. It became a symbol for them all, a sign of the power of courage, of saying what is in your heart, and of taking a big chance on love. Young folks would read it and feel stirred to be a little braver in their own lives, to go after what they wanted instead of just waiting for it to find them. And somewhere, in whatever good place comes after this one, Nathan and Clara Ellis were together again, young and healthy, still falling in love with each other every single day. They were still thankful for a cowboy's courage and a good woman's choice to wear yellow, still writing their love story for all of time. The legacy they left behind was not just about land or money, or even the children who carried on their name. It was in the example they lived out, a life of partnership and respect, and a love that did not quit. It was in the lesson that love is not just a feeling you get, but a choice you make every day, through the good times and the bad. It was in knowing that sometimes the biggest things in life start with the smallest acts of courage. Writing a letter, putting on a yellow dress, saying yes to what might be. Their story became woven into the history of Empire City, told and retold, maybe with a few extra details added here and there. But the real story did not need any dressing up. It was special enough all on its own. A cowboy and the postmaster's daughter who built a life that lasted half a century, who raised children that made the world a little bit better, and who loved each other with a steady, deep kindness that only got stronger with time. In the end, that was their gift to the world. It was not just the Cottonwood Ranch or the family that would carry on their name, but the proof that a true and honest love is real, that it can be found and looked after and held on to. That sometimes, when you are brave enough to reach out for it, happiness is real. That letters matter, words matter, and the courage to speak from your heart can change a whole life. The town of Empire City, Colorado, still stands today as a monument to the pioneers who built it, and the love stories that gave it a soul. And among all those stories, none is told more often or remembered with more fondness than the one about Nathan Ellis and Clara Foster. Their love started with a single letter and never truly ended, its echo traveling through the years, pushing each new generation to be brave, to speak their truth, and to believe in the life-changing power of love. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.